Okay, good evening and welcome everybody to the T28 fourth webinar. Our topic today will be about the understanding the climate change influence on water systems and oceanic health. I'm delighted to have three of distinguished speakers in their field related to our webinar's topic today. I'll start with Professor Richard Mulwa, the Director of the Environment for Development Kenya Center at the University of Nairobi and Secretary General of the African Society of Ecological Economists. And also Professor Radwan Al-Wishah, a Professor of Civil Engineering at the University of Jordan, former Dean of Scientific Research, and an international expert in hydrology and water resources engineering. Also, Ms. Sultanate Kazi, the fellow at the Environment Education and Awareness Division of the Energy and Resources Institute. Welcome all of you, our distinguished speakers. And I will start actually to ask Professor Richard to give us like an overall view about our webinar's topic today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mohammed Hamdan, and thank you too to my two colleagues, Prof from is it Jordan, Arman, Jordan, and then my sister from India. So as you heard, my name is Richard Mulwa from the University of Nairobi, and I'm also leading the center that is called Environment for Development, which does research on environmental economics, largely in various areas, water being one of them. And our topic today is on understanding the impact of climate change on water systems and oceanic health. Now, those are two related but different subjects. One is the water systems, the other one is the oceanic health. So let me start by addressing the impact of climate change on water systems. And for us to be able to understand this, clearly we can approach this from the direction of the expected temperature increment and also reduction in precipitation from temperature changes. Now, the projections are showing that going into the future, we are going to have depressed precipitation in many parts of the world and increasing temperatures also. Now, already, those two, a combination of those two means that we are going to have depressed rainfall in some areas, and the increase in temperature means that we are going to have increased evaporation. So already what that means is that you're going to have water deficits in some parts of the world, but increased temperatures also could have the effect of increasing rainfall, and you have flooding in some parts of the world. So in some areas, it's going to be very dry. In some areas, it's also going to be very wet. And each one of those two has significant impacts on livelihoods of people in different parts of the world, especially the areas which are drier now. They're expected to get more dry. And when you look at this, for example, from the supply risk of water, what is expected to happen is you're likely to have decreased availability of water and also accessibility of that water. What is going to happen is perhaps in catchment areas, you're going to have lesser and lesser amounts of water. Right now, if you look at the measure for physical availability of water, which is called the Falkenmark Index, it says that the moment you start getting below 1,700 cubic meters per person per year, you're entering into a level of water stress. And many countries are already below that. Climate change is going to complicate that even further. So you're going to have lesser water, which means that you're going to have less availability of water for people. You're going to have lesser accessibility. And if you compound this with population increment and the demand from the different sectors of the economy, then this is going to be severe as we move across or as we move ahead. The next thing that you could talk about is the vulnerability of the supply of this water. So the moment we have these catchment areas being denied of the hitherto precipitation that they are used to, then what means is that you're going to have decline of water, for example, in our storage dams. And this is going to have impact not just in the water that we are using, but also for countries that rely on hydro energy is going to have a lot of impact. So the impact of climate change on water systems is not just going to affect people's livelihoods, it has other impacts on the economy also. Then finally touching on the oceanic health. Right now, I believe the pH of water in the ocean is about 8.1. And the projections are going into the future. This could decline to 7.7. So the oceans are going to become more acidic because of high carbon dioxide. Oceans are absorbing about 30% of the total carbon dioxide that is emitted. Now, this has an impact on the ocean ecosystems. So many species, perhaps, if they don't adapt, they are going to disappear. And this is going to have an impact on the ocean ecosystems, is going to have an impact on livelihoods, especially people that depend on the oceans for their livelihoods. So it's a bit it's a very complex system when you try to disentangle what climate change is going to mean for the water systems and the oceanic health. The impact will be quite huge going into the future if nothing is done about climate change. So let me stop there, Mr. Hamdan, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. And Professor Radwan, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, I have a cold. So it's my pleasure to be with this esteemed group, Professor Mulwa and Ms. Kazi and yourself, my dear friend, Mohammed Hamdan. As you know, we in the Arab region and the Middle East, I have served as the regional hydrologist for the Arab region as the Nile Basin countries for about 10 years when I was serving in UNESCO. I learned much about the vulnerability and the water stress in this region. Professor Mulwa said that water stress level of 1,700 cubic meter per capita per year is a water stress or water poverty line. Sadly, we say that in most of the Arab countries in the Middle East and MENA region, this number is below 500. For example, in Jordan now, the per capita water share of freshwater supply is less than 61 meter cube per capita per year, which is one of the world poorest countries in the water poorest country. As mentioned earlier, water scarcity will be a major constraint on social and economic development in these countries. For example, in our region, one of the scenarios of the global circulation models that rainfall in most of the arid region, like in the Middle East, for example, Jordan, will expect a shortage in rainfall of between 16% and 30%. And also there would be an increase in the extreme events of the droughts and flood cycles that are expected and are well noted in these times. We have a shift in the rainy season for about 1 month. So the water year used to start in late September, early October in our calendar, in hydrologic calendar. Now it's shifted more than 1 month. The number of rainy days during the winter season, because we have two distinct seasons here. We have the summer season and the winter season. The number of rainy days has been reduced to less than 30%. The number of days, if we are comparing 40 years before, and the latest 40 years that we have studied in our climate change impact on water resources. Also, despite the fact that this will be a shortage in water supply, there will be expected an increase in water demand as the rise of temperature. You will have more water demand for human use and for irrigation due to the fact that there will be more evaporation. There will be more stress on the groundwater system because this is also a major source of drinking water and irrigation water of most of the arid region, like in the MENA region and the Middle East. So this is an issue that has to be addressed and has to be both mitigated, and we have to improve the adaptation tools that will cope with these issues of water scarcity and increase the demand and the increase in the water deficit, given the increase in water population and the hydropolitics of the region. So this is required some serious mitigation measures as well as adaptation tools to address the water scarcity and water stress in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Radwan. And actually, I will come to the mitigation and the adaptation, the balance between this, what we shall do and what will be our priorities in this matter. And now, Ms. Sultanate, if you can kindly please give like an overview about our topic today.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mohammed Hamdan, and thank you, Professor Richard Mulwa and Professor Hamdan. I'll wish, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No problem.
Wisha.
Yeah, Wisha. So thank you for having me here. And, the thing is that I work with TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute, and our organization has different verticals. So we have a group that's doing work on water extensively. I am part of the group that is working with which is promoting education for sustainable development. And as part of this group, we are looking at empowering schools to monitor and collect, to collect data and monitor, oceanic health. And in that context, we are looking at two climate change parameters related to salinity and temperature. The reason that we are looking at these two parameters, temperature is a very important parameter because it, influences density. It has an influence on salinity, the amount of dissolved oxygen. Then it looks at. It also has an impact on the pH. So because of all these aspects, temperature is like one of the key parameters, and we are working with schools to try and empower them to monitor the water quality in the water bodies in their vicinity. So as a result of this, it's like they are collecting the data, and it's not data which has been collected, say, by the government or whatever. So there is a sense of ownership in the data because they have collected it. They have gone for the sampling. They have collected the data, and then they are monitoring it, and they're seeing what has been the trend. So what is the trend in the temperature change, in different seasons across the years. So this is something that we've started, and the purpose of the whole exercise is to empower the education system so that they can then incorporate this into the curriculum, and then work with the community for evidence-based awareness and sensitization to to come up with mitigative and adaptive measures for the same. So this is something that we have been working with, and this program which I'm speaking about, it's called Project Ocean Matters, and it is supported by the U.S. Consulate Chennai, and we are using the GLOBE protocol which is again, a protocol which has been developed by scientists across the world, and the protocols are well established, and they're and it's utilized across the world. So then you can get the data at what is happening at the local level, and you can see it at the global scale as well. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, I will start first actually with Professor Radwan, as he mentioned the causes. Okay, I mean the other esteemed speakers mentioned the consequences, okay, of the climate change, but Dr. Radwan like focused on the causes. Doctor, taking in consideration this shifting in the hydrological cycle and this shift in the precipitation, and also as Dr. Richard mentioned, in evaporation rate due to the increasing of the temperature, all this climate change induced shifting. So what will be on both the quality and the quantity? What will be the direct impacts on the quality and the quantity of water systems globally, not only on the Middle East? I'm asking about the direct impacts of on the water security in terms of quantity and quality.
I think there is a significant impact on the water quantity. As you know, we have different global circulation models that has been developed around, and they try to study the impact of climate change with different temperature scenarios on water resources. Most of the records indicate that will be a decrease between 10 to 30% in dry region. In wet region, you will expect more on the rainfall storms in some wet areas. Another consequences that we did not probably mention much is the rise in seawater level. A rise in seawater level of 70 centimeters will inundate about major areas and small islands and deltas in the world. For example, in Egypt, if the water level of the seawater level increased by more 1 meter, the most of the delta will be underwater, and this is the food basket for Egypt. So this has major consequences. Also, we will expect to see also a decrease in water quality in terms of, because we'll have overexploitation of groundwater and increase in aquifer salinity, because most of the water will be pumped by depleting the aquifers and exploiting the groundwater aquifers that are used mainly for drinking and irrigation, as mentioned earlier.
So there will be like also a direct impact in groundwater recharge and
Yes.
the long-term viability of aquifers.
Yes.
Can you, Professor Radwan, enlighten us more about this groundwater recharge, impact on groundwater recharge? Are we now like facing the man action or man extra use, overuse? Is that the problem as an indirect consequences of the climate change, or we have the climate climate-driven change that impact directly the recharge groundwater?
In fact, it's both. For example, given the increase in temperature and the lack of surface water in form of rainwater, you'll have to pump more water for drinking and irrigation purposes. This will deplete the aquifers. This will reduce the water table and the artesian water level in most of the aquifers, which is already overexploited by additional population and demand. Yani, this is both combined, the man-made and climate change effect on the groundwater. This will also affect the quality of groundwater, mainly the salinity, and also this will reduce the recharge because most of the renewable water, groundwater resources in the region are recharged by groundwater and surface water through rainfall or other sources. So this will eventually reduce the recharge, and then the safe yield of the aquifer themselves will be reduced significantly.
Okay, thank you so much. Very enlightful. Dr. Richard, I mean, on the light of what Professor Radwan mentioned, how should urban planning and water resources management adjust to maintain water security or to avoid all these consequences on our water systems?
Well, of course, the demand for water will continue to increase because there is demand from the economy. There is demand from increasing population. So demand is going to increase anyhow. And now you have, of course, even on a normal, on a business as usual scenario, even without climate change, with increase in population and increasing economic demands, you have increased consumption, increased industrial production. So that in itself was putting strain on the available water resources already. As Prof said, in many countries in the MENA region, already the per capita levels are below 500. Here in Kenya, it's about 600. So even without climate change, there was strain on the water, the available water resources. Now, if you put climate change into that matrix, that becomes even more complicated. Now, moving forward on how to reduce this, climate change is here with us to stay. We cannot wish it away. We can only adapt to climate change or mitigate the impact of climate change. And in the immediate or in the shorter term, we are going to have both adaptation measures, which may be aiming at either protecting the existing water sources. For example, the existing catchments, they need to be protected and protected very seriously. And then in the long term, we can only talk about mitigation. And this would be in terms of making sure that, first of all, our commitments to the NDC, to the Paris Agreement, each country is committed to that. Then the other thing is everybody is talking about the net zero emissions by the year 2050. We need to be very clear on what measures we are going to take. Last week, we had the Africa Climate Week. It just ended in Nairobi. And many countries are giving a lot of commitment on how we are going to go about the issue of climate change. And I believe when we have the meeting at the COP28 in Dubai, then we are going to have even more commitments on what countries want to do at individual level or at a global level. So we have adaptation measures which we can take, although I'm not sure they are going to make any significant reduction on the impact. For example, protecting of the catchment areas, that is okay, it's fine. The other issue would be seawater desalination, although it's very expensive to deal with. We here in Kenya, I think there were proposals of starting 2 plants on seawater desalination, but the expenses are quite huge. And then the other thing is where you what you do with the brine that is being produced from this particular process. It's very detrimental to the environment. So there are things that could be done in the short term to make sure that at least we don't slide into the abyss. But in the longer term, what is going to help us are mitigation measures. And also the issue of recycling water, making sure that whatever water we are using, either whether it's what we call black water or gray water, it's taken back into the system and reused again. I think we need to make sure that this does happen if we want to move in this direction. So thank you very much. I could say that for now.
Okay. Professor Richard, you mentioned that you are not sure about the real impact of these measurements. Is that due to the uncommitment by the nations or by the countries with the global policies, or due to the gaps in the policies themselves, the policies that are concerned with the water system sustainability globally?
Well, we have the common but differentiated responsibility, and each country is supposed to take certain measures. In the NDC, I think everybody has committed to a certain percentage. The question is, are these commitments enough? For instance, if you say that you're going to reduce carbon emissions by 30% in the year 2030, is that going to be enough? And the measures, the internal measures in a particular country, are they even, is it possible to even reach that particular number? And the basis for which we are saying that we are going to reduce these numbers, I don't know whether these calculations are very well done. I don't want to say that they are not very well done, but the idea is when we are saying that we want to reach a number, maybe 30% reduction by the year 2030, how feasible is that number? What will be the impact of that on the economy of that particular country, for instance? Because if you're saying that you're going to be doing reductions, let's say in energy sector, or you're doing reduction in the agriculture sector, what is the impact of that on the economy of the country? So there are many things that are playing internally to make sure that maybe these goals may not be attainable. What countries have promised maybe by the year 2030, many of them may not get up to those numbers. But then the net zero emissions by the year 2050 is even requiring more. We need even more commitments. So are we able to get to what we've already promised by the year 2030 before we even get to net zero emissions by the year 2050? So it's both a local problem, the policies, internal policies of the country, not maybe being able to reach the targets that they are promising, but also on a global scale, I think there's a lot of blame game especially on the common but differentiated responsibility. Some people are saying maybe we are polluting our pollution is very low compared to everybody else. Why are we being tasked to maybe do a lot of reduction? So there's also a lot of political economy in this. And I think this is what is going to challenge the movement into the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will come to the political aspect and the economic and political aspects of this problem. But this combination between the lack of commitment and also the gaps in the global frameworks and conventions that address water system sustainability make things even worse, as you mentioned, Dr. Now. Miss Sultanate, if we considering the direct impact of the climate change on the oceanic health in terms of changing or shifting in salinity and also the acidifications, all these, as our guest mentioned, will have direct impacts on the habitats, on the marine life, on the coastal systems, on the ocean ecological system, how that will impact the livelihood of people who are directly or mainly depends on these systems.
I mean, we have people say who are dependent say directly for their livelihood through the ocean, and there are also people who are indirectly linked to the ocean. So I would say we could look at it, through these two. So those who are directly and indirectly. So if I'm saying, say, directly, I would give you the example of, say, the fishing community, because they're directly dependent on it for fish catch. Indirectly, it is because, protein source of nutrition, I mean, from the ocean is the biggest protein source and cheap source of nutrition for a lot of people along the coast. So indirectly, a lot of people are again dependent on it. So, depleting fish catch, changing patterns, in terms of fish catch because of changing temperature, the spawning season will be
changing
changing.
species, marine species migration patterns.
Absolutely, yeah. So all of this has implications, both, for those who are dependent on it directly as well as for those who are dependent on it indirectly. And that is what needs to be emphasized on, because sometimes it's like, you think that, okay, the fishing community is a small population and it's a small number that's going to be impacted, but it's not just a small number that's going to be impacted, but it's a larger number when you look at it in the context of the indirect impacts. And I think that's the kind of discussion and narratives that need to be emphasized even more strongly, so that policy perspectives are then taken even more. It's like you have the policy framework, but it's in terms of the implementation of it. So you need to give strength to the to ensure that these regulations are all implemented, and there is a very rigorous monitoring of it as well happening. So both these is something I would say we need to focus on as well.
So these shifts, as you mentioned, will in directly and indirectly will impact the fish stocks. Okay, some like fishing area will there will be like a decline in fish stocks in some areas while emerging on others. Okay, that will change a lot, even in terms of international agreements, the transboundary international agreements regarding the fisheries, that will change a lot politically, economy, and but what will be the impact on the food security, global food security, and also trade dynamics?
So yes, I mean, if you're looking at food security, if you're looking at trade dynamics, there is an impact on all fronts. Um, I mean, it's not like, say, when we are talking of the changes in temperature, it's affecting, say, the coral reefs. The coral reefs is the place where you have a lot of it's like the breeding ground, or it's like the nursery where you have a lot of fish dependent over there. So you have the implications of it, is far more uh, than what we are looking at. And in terms of let's say, in terms of the export, the countries which are dependent on a large who are dependent on export of fish. So maybe it's through either through fish catch, which is the wild fish catch, or it's also through, say, cultured fisheries that is happening. So and you're looking at it in terms of it. So these are the things that is going to be impacted because of the change. And there is also another problem, is the whole marine pollution that is impacting again. So these are other things that is affecting the fish population a lot, and affecting the whole catch that is there. So what we're seeing is that there is a decline in the fish catch that is there. We are seeing a decline in in the size of the fish also that is being caught. So all this is then impacting the amount of like, it's like, say, if you were the effort that you had to put is now going more, and that's why then the cost is increasing also. for the same amount of fish that you're catching. So then if I'm looking at, the emissions, then it's like, say, I'm using more fuel to go fishing, and then, my emission levels are also going up in that way, and I'm again contributing to the uh, greenhouse gas emissions in through the whole activity as well. So it's like, it is a circular impact, because you're getting impacted by it, and then you're contributing also to it. So that's the way how it is, how I
Thank
see.
you so, thank you so much. Professor Radwan, do you agree with Professor Richard regarding that there are like significant gaps in the global frameworks and conventions that address the sustainability of water systems?
Yes, sure. I think there is a gap, especially with developed and underdeveloped countries. For example, if you consider the CO2 emission by countries, you find that some countries have low CO2 emission, but they have high impacted by the climate change. On the contrary, there are many countries which are having high rate of CO2 emission, and their contribution to the mitigation measures and climate change adaptation are limited. Of course, people are playing around with that by sharing that as per capita CO2 emission, or per country CO2 emission, or per يعني bear the production or dollar amount of the production. So this can be to be a very uniform indicator. You have to consider all the impact. You have to consider the social, the environmental, and the economic impact of these activities, so that you can come up with a very good indicator that will indicate the contribution and the response of each country or community to this climate change. Also, it is worth mentioning that we are talking about water, energy, food, and environment nexus now. We add environment to that. And part of this, to manage that, is to use what you call integrated resources management, or circular economy, green economy, in which you have to consider all these aspects together, so that you can have balance between the economic development, environmental conservation, social equity, as well as the global sustainability of water resources and other resources. This is an important factor that need to be addressed in an integrated manner. Most of the people now are addressing supply demand. We are going for now integrated water resource management, which include, as I mentioned, the social, the economic, and the environmental aspect of water. And we have to think about, for example, what we call in water resources trading, virtual water, in which you can buy or produce product that consumes water in terms of a product, like either vegetables or cars or textiles or other materials that are exported or imported, which have water embedded in that commodity. Another issue is that we have to think also about how to optimize the crop per drop in agriculture. Most of the countries, most of the underdeveloped countries, the water sector, irrigation sector, consumes between 60 to 80% of the available water supply. So they have to optimize their system using the new techniques in irrigation, using the crops that are require less water demand, and to capitalize on these factors. On the demand side, also the supply side, also we have to consider other tools like water harvesting. Small scale water harvesting seems to be very efficient, in a desert area where we have Bedouins who were able to sustain their life by collecting rainwater during the rainy season and use them overall the year round, using this rainwater harvested from their catchments or from their rooftops or from their yards sometimes. We have to consider this. We have on the demand side, we have also to do a campaign on the management. Management means you have to do a demand management, conservation measures. You have to raise the public awareness about water issues, and you have to do a recycling of water, as Professor mentioned. Yani recycling now of gray water or other waters. We especially that we have the technology that help us in doing that. On top of all of that, water desalination is and technology is the key element in future sustainability of water resources. Given that water supply is decreasing and the demand increasing, you have no other solution other than to go to water desalination. And luckily, with this new breakthrough in the technology, water desalination become less expensive now, and the energy sources using renewable energy and solar systems are very feasible, and the cost I've read that the cost of 1 cubic meter by desalinated 1 cubic meter of seawater can cost down to about $0.25, 25 cents, and sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. But you mentioned that we should like adapt to new technologies, okay, to like address the water systems challenge. Do you think that our current global policies are adaptable to incorporate new technologies or new data-driven technologies or knowledge? Do you think we have the frameworks, enough frameworks to do that?
This is, in fact, a challenge to the government. All the water sector, most of the water sectors are run by the public sectors. If we run the water sector by business model, which is the private partnership with the public sector, we can adopt these technologies, and the payback period of this technology will be tremendous. Yani, you can pay back the initial cost of the technology in several years. Yani, sometimes 3 to 10 years, the payback period will be feasible. So I think there is a room if there is a will in that. The problem that in the government system and the public sector, you have a heavy bureaucracy and changes and legislations and the institutional setup are not well equipped to adapt these changes fastly. But with the partnership between the private sector and especially through pilot projects, if you have pilot projects that will enhance and prove that these technologies are feasible and their payback period are economically feasible, this can be a good example for the public sector.
Interesting. And Doctor, you mentioned also the smart agriculture as one of the solutions for the water system issues. And this question actually for all my distinguished speakers. Do you think that one of the significant gap that we have in terms of global policy regarding the water system, that we are not connected, we are dealing with two separate entities, the irrigation or the agriculture actually, and the water systems, and there no enough linkage between the policies that address both of these important sectors in terms in the light of the climate change. I will start with the Professor Richard. You are muted, Professor.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Hamdan. And yeah, I would say that I think in many countries, these sectors are run in a parallel way. You you have policies that are addressing agriculture and other policies that are addressing irrigation. So water is run by a different system of policies and acts. Agriculture is run by a different system of policies and acts. And in most cases, you don't see them merging. It's like two parallel systems that are running. So it's important to appreciate that if water is a consumer or agriculture is a consumer of the water resource, then whatever policies we have in both sectors, they should be communicating to each other. It should be policies that are aimed at water-saving technologies in agriculture. If we are talking about irrigation, then it should be spoken both in the water sector. It should be spoken both in agriculture, and the two should marry, and they should speak the same language, other than the situation where you're addressing irrigation and you're saying that these are the different types of irrigation, this is how you're going to deal with them, and then you come to agriculture and you're addressing different crops and how they are going to be produced. So it's important that the two speak to each other.
Thank you so much, Professor Radwan. You muted also.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I mentioned the integration between, water sector has to be integrated and put on the top of the governmental agenda in each country. For example, most of the countries, they have Ministry of Water, Electricity, and Agriculture in one unit. This is, in fact, not a typical and an example of good water governance, because you have to make a balance between the users and the regulator of the sectors. This is, agriculture and energy are users, and the water ministry or water body or authority should be a regulator and supplier. So you should not mix these three sectors together, although they have to be integrated directly. This is an important point on the governance issue. The other point is that people, in agriculture sector, for example, in most of the countries now, I'm talking about Jordan, we are treating our wastewater to a level that it can be used for irrigation. So we are treating about 80 to 85% of our wastewater to be reused with irrigation by mixing it with other sources of water. So agriculture can be a user of this recycled water that meet the quality and the requirement, international requirement of water quality. So there is no competition. Sometimes there can be integration between these two sectors.
Thank you so much. Ms. Saltanat, do you have any comments regarding this?
Yeah, so I agree, with what Professor Richard mentioned. So in India also we have two separate departments, for agriculture and a separate department on water resources. But what we are looking at currently, so when India gained independence, we had the whole green revolution and the emphasis on working towards the food security of the country, and as a result of which there was an impact on the water resources of the country. And now what we are looking at more is we are moving towards the path of sustainable agriculture. And when we are looking at sustainable agriculture, we are looking at it in the context of water. We are looking at it in the context of energy that is being used for it. So I think that's something that we need to look at it like have a sustainable agriculture, and then look at all the resources that is required for it, and work towards it that way. So whether it is in terms of the inputs that is being added to it, from where it is being sourced, whether it is the renewable sources, if it's water, if you're pumping the water, are you using renewable sources, the amount of water that you're using for it. So all these various parameters is something that we can look at in the context of sustainable agriculture.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Tenant, I know that one of your research main research interest area is the oceanic health. So I will try to connect both subjects actually, taking in consideration all the climate change driven alterations in water system that you mentioned. What will be the impact on the biodiversity of the coastal area? These alterations, I mean.
So I'm not sure how it is in in the Gulf and in Africa, but at least in India, if I see, and I'm looking at it, say in the context of education, the school curriculum also, I would say the emphasis is more on terrestrial ecosystem rather than aquatic ecosystem, and as a result of which, students are not even aware of the impacts of uh, uh, of I mean the environmental impacts on the aquatic ecosystem. So when we talk of biodiversity, it's again, I would say terrestrial biodiversity that first comes into the mind, and not aquatic biodiversity or marine biodiversity that is being impacted. And I think that is the area that we need to focus on, and that is what we are trying to do through trying to ensure that the curriculum is looking at these aspects of the impact on marine biodiversity. And it's like, say, you do simple exercises where it's not just through the textbooks, but like taking kids out for a walk, doing shore walk or beach trails, where they're actually looking at what is the beach ecosystem, what is the kind of biodiversity that is supported at the beaches. And that's something that becomes a huge learning for students. So when we've done these exercises, say, in Mumbai, which is like, one of the most urban and one of the most populated cities of India, and when you take students to the beach over there and then they see the amount of biodiversity that is still available, that becomes like becomes a source for them then to work towards, to see that, and along with that they're also seeing the amount of plastic waste that is all littered over there. So in that way, we try to work towards getting them to to work towards conservation of the biodiversity. And again, it's not just and look at it in the context of the whole the beach ecosystem. So the importance of the beach, the sand dunes, the dunes, the beach vegetation, because often these things are not given importance. And when you start stripping off the vegetation because it's hampering, say, the sea view, you are impacting. There are a lot of other impacts that is happening, because sea view is like the priced commodity. So if we don't sensitize our future generation about it, then this practice is going to continue. But when they actually understand the importance of the ecosystem, and the biodiversity that it is supporting, that's when y- we can look at a sustained change happening in that direction.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Radwan, you mentioned in your introduction actually that we need to adapt and to mitigate. And now this question actually for all, also for all the speakers. Uh, with these changes in the this climate induced change on our water systems, do nations have to adapt to the current change or mitigate of further damage? So what will be our priority? We'll start with Professor Radwan. Professor Radwan?
It's muted.
Okay, I'm muted. Okay. Again, for adaptation measures, the most effective way is to introduce to the water climate resilience system. Climate resilient system means that you develop and you update your agriculture and irrigation, your domestic water use, your energy sector, so that it will be in harmony with the climate change and the climate change scenarios. This is one of the most effective tools that can be used, and it can be also used at phases. Yani it can be, we can do that in stages and putting target for each 5 to 10 years of this climate resilience system. The other way is that how to mitigate, and mitigate, as we mentioned, we have to reduce your CO2 emissions, and the carbon cycle has to be reduced. And you have, luckily now we have a lot of renewable sources of energy and tools that, and green economy, green smart agriculture, all these technologies that we are having in hand now that can be utilized to serve this cause of new technologies and smart techniques in dealing with climate impact and climate mitigation and adaptation.
Professor Richard?
Yeah, I think both adaptation and mitigation will be required.
Yeah, but what
Sometimes I
will be
don't.
the priority for the time being?
Yes, sometimes they don't have to be mutually exclusive, that you have one and then you have the other. Sometimes you could have adaptation projects that do have a mitigation component, or the reverse could be true, mitigation projects that have adaptation. But according to what Professor Adwan said, in the immediate, I would think that we go for adaptation measures. And he talked about efficient irrigation systems, sustainable water harvesting, especially at the household level. We make sure that we promote that. Then we also make sure that we protect our water catchments through integrated water resource management systems. We could also do water management through recycling of water. And seawater desalination comes up as an option also. But also the other issue is the issue of water pricing. Water is a very cheap commodity. And I would want to believe when we are trying to protect the catchment areas, we might have payment for ecosystem services, in which case communities are protecting these catchment systems. Now, they don't do it for free. If we expect them to do it for free, then they are not going to do it. So if we set up payment for ecosystem services and we make sure that we pay, then that might have benefits in the immediate future. As of course we plan going into the future, the longer term would be mitigation effort, making sure that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, targeting towards the net zero in 2050, and then in the mid and end of century, we see what we are able to do. But immediately, let's adapt.
Adaptation. Okay, I will come to Mr. Danat, but before, because Professor Richard, you mentioned a point that actually one of our audience is asking about, Mr. Andrew. Would desalination be an objectively effective tool to reduce the drought and demand on aquifer? And could it be also a tool to recharge these aquifers and stabilize the water tables?
Yes, I can answer on that.
Yeah. Let's let Prof answer that. He's an hydrologist. He's better.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, I think yes, desalination project, and we have examples in the Gulf region, the Arabian Gulf region. We have examples of huge desalination plants in which they sometimes use managed aquifer recharge. They use to stabilize the production in the desalination plant. Sometimes you have fluctuation between seasons and day and night. So they have steady state. Any surplus desalinated water will be recharged to a specific aquifers, and they can reclaim this water later if needed at a rate more than 70 to 75%. And there are pilot projects in this area, which are clear to us. On
Is
the
that,
other hand,
yeah,
on
yes,
the
please.
other hand, on the other hand, if you use desalinated water and become economically cheaper than exploiting groundwater, this will affect also the water supply and will allow the aquifer to restore themselves to a sustainable way.
Yeah, but Professor Adwan, you mentioned like Gulf region as an example. Okay, and yes, they are like leading in the desalination technology. But like one may argue with the visibility of this. I mean, financial wise, okay, it's a costly process. Maybe it works in the Gulf because they have the oil, okay, they have the fuel sources to do, or the energy sources to do it in a cheap price. But what about other countries who don't have these energy sources?
Uh, let's think of renewable energy, solar energy. For example, Jordan does not have oil, and we are thinking of a mega project now called the National Carrier, in which we will desalinate water from the Gulf of Aqaba and carry that through a 400-kilometer pipeline to the north to Amman and the populated cities around Amman. So this is, we are planning to use solar energy. We have most of the underdeveloped countries, they have a lot of sun in their region. In Africa and the Middle East, they can use this solar system. And the technology, the PV technology, is becoming cheaper and cheaper now. Yani, the latest offers we have in Jordan, that the cost of kilowatt hour of capacity is less than 10 cents, 10 US dollar cents. So this is a feasible option. Once we use also the membrane technology and the advanced water desalination approach, as I mentioned, the cost of desalinated water on site will be less than $0.25 compared to $2.50 if you are using the fossil fuel and the traditional boiling system, which is the thermal units.
Thank you so much, Miss Sultan.
Yeah. So I would say that we need to, I wouldn't again, go by it's either or. I would say that we need to work with both because, we can look at it in a way that, you're investing now and you're reaping the benefits immediately. And there would be some where we would be reaping the benefits at a later time. So we need to work on both. And another thing that I would like to even emphasize is, Dr. Richard, Professor Richard spoke about, different aspects. We've spoken about desalinization as well. But I think, what we also need to focus on is that, the water that we've extracted and we've used, we need to ensure that that water is, channelized again. So the treatment of gray water, the treatment of black water, and once the water is treated, to even get people to utilize that water, because there's so much of a mindset that people are not ready to utilize that water. So these are things that we need to focus on and work towards, because that's very important. And we also need to look at in terms of lifestyle changes, because it's like we are looking at a high consumptive lifestyle, and and especially when we're looking at resources, be it energy, be it water. So we have to even individually we can make these changes which can impact and it's like these individual changes will have an impact when you look at it. So if you're looking at it in terms of the per capita emissions, those also will be dropping down. So these are some of the things that is very important. I would add on to it.
Okay. In terms of changing lifestyle and mindset, you agree with Professor Radwan? He mentioned also one like a very interesting point as an example, like the Bedouin or the locals, okay, who like over hundred of years adopted kind of drought management, their own drought management, and yes, they survived, okay, and they succeeded in that. Do we need, okay, on a global level, on the framework and convention, policy frameworks and convention level, to reconsider these traditional or local for the local community, the traditional means for the local community in how to deal with our water resources?
Yeah, I would say so, because what is happening is that, I think what we need to also work on is, to establish and reconnect, us with the environment, reconnect of us with, our image. Because what is happening is that, that connect is not there. And if you see, our traditional societies were there, and they were the ones who lived in an integrated way, where that connect was there, and because of that integration that was there with the environment, it was like holistic ways through which they used to live, and approach an issue or come up with a solution to it. What over a period of time has happened is that we are not looking, there is like an environment has become separate, humans have become separate, and that reconnection or that integration has to come about, like, where we are part of the environment, and it's like where we are dependent on it as well, and we have to understand what is the impact that we are causing towards it. So these are some of the things that have to be, very closely integrated and need to be looked at. And, as Professor Radwan mentioned about the Bedouin, so I'm sure there would be examples even in, Kenya, of traditional knowledge. We have, traditional systems in India where, where water has been, maybe it's through the, to have the pond system. We've had systems where the water has been stored, where we've looked at, ensuring that groundwater is being recharged. But over a period of time, these things have sort of have sort of, fizzled out, or, it has lost that importance. And that's because of this disconnect that we have, with the environment. And I think that is something where, those connects need to be strengthened even more strongly.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will stay with you, Ms. Sultanate, actually, but this time we'll move from the like the desert, the desert to the sea. Okay, and from the Bedouin communities to the coastal communities. And I want actually to ask you about the blue economy. Okay, we'll come later to the this. How we can integrate the green economy with the blue economy, how this colors combination will lead us to, I don't know, sustainable, more sustainable mechanisms and framework. But for the blue economy that evolves with the changing marine ecosystems, what are the anticipated challenges and opportunities for coastal communities, especially in developing countries? Hello?
Hello, yeah. You're asking me, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, fine. So, yes, so, I mean, if you're looking at coastal communities, I mean, say, the impacts of, say, it's say fisheries, you're looking at tourism. And some of these, say, for instance, tourism, especially coastal tourism, it's something that is, I mean, it's coastal tourism is selling uh, itself, so that you have tourists coming in, and so it's important that, it, you know there is a better management of the coastal ecosystem, because then you can get, good quality tourists coming in. But what happens is that, you're looking at short term gains, you're looking at reducing the because you want tourists to come in, you're reducing the prices. You're looking at numbers of tourists coming in, and as a result of which this is impacting on the coastal resources. And because of these impacts on the coastal resources, they're not going to sustain over a longer period of time. And we've seen this happen, in a lot of coastal areas, because and that is because there is no proper planning that is happening, towards, say, I mean, if you're looking at coastal tourism. So whatever, whichever sector it is, whether we are looking at tourism, whether we are looking at fisheries, it has to be in a planned manner. It has to be done, taking stakeholder consultations, where we are looking at local concerns as well, so that um, uh, they are concerns, and we have a sense of ownership, because they will then take it forward. So these are some of the things that we have to focus on and work with when we are looking at coastal sectors, for the sustenance of these various sectors within the coastal areas. uh, and um, and it's something that, again, where we have to look at it, in a circular way, so that it is something that it will sustain, and it remains. So that's something that we would need to focus on.
So we need kind of or we need actually to balance the needs between the economic aspirations of the blue economy and the ecological needs and the coastal and island nations. All of that, yes, but how to do that actually? How? I mean, the blue economy is both conservation tool and development opportunity on the other hand. How can or what are the financial mechanisms to ensure the balance doesn't tip too far in one direction rather than the other? This is for actually all the speakers, and I will start with Professor Richard, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And when it comes to the blue economy, we are talking about marine spatial plans, number one, and integrated coastal zone management, which in most cases I think will be taken up by the marine spatial plans. And these marine spatial plans are going to demarcate specific areas for specific economic sectors. For example, tourism, fisheries, mining, coastal agriculture, if it's there, and all these are going to be demarcated and given appropriate spaces. One of the challenges with these marine spatial plans is that they tend, for the most part, to neglect the poor and the vulnerable in the community. In many cases, I think these plans are developed at higher levels of government without involvement of the local communities. So what would happen is a marine spatial plan is developed, and then communities are told, okay, we are going to have fishing here. We prefer tourism in this particular place. We prefer that in this other place there is going to be oil mining or whatever sectors are there in that particular economy. So going forward, for the sake of conservation also, and making sure that the local communities do benefit, they have to be involved, and in the planning, they have to be consulted on what they think should be where, because they are the ones that are operating in that particular space. Now, the other thing is the projects that are being started there. We have, for instance, blue carbon projects that are being started in the coastal zones of many countries, and they are selling carbon, for instance. So one of the things is that could be one of the tools to make sure that we enhance conservation efforts. The other thing would having specific demarcated areas for conservation. I think they are called conservation areas in the marine environment. We have specific areas that have been demarcated, and they serve as, for instance, they could be breeding grounds for different sea species, but also they are very important areas for tourism attraction. So if we could use this, and if I got your question correctly, then for conservation efforts, these are some of the tools that we could apply almost immediately and make sure that we involve the local communities in the planning of the sea space.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very insightful. Thank you. Dr. Professor Radwan.
Yes, again, I think it has to be integrated. Yani the blue economy, the green economy, the agriculture, the urban development, all of these aspects has to be integrated. And the impact of each project, especially development project, has to be well studied about the impact on the ecosystem service, on the water resources, on the marine, especially, for example, a lot nobody mentioned about coral reef. With the Red Sea, we have a lot of coral reef that are affected by the induced activities of people, some of them related to climate change. Anyhow, so I think the keyword is integration, and the keyword is that you have to sharing data, involve stakeholders, and plan in a way that is sustainable, uh, considering all aspects. And you have to consider the people who are the less, what you call the poor, who are not always there on the table. So they have to consider, for example, some sort of incentive system, some sort of support should be provided to them, so that the system, if you want to charge for any of the ecosystem service, you have to come with a subsidy system that will compensate the poor who cannot afford to pay for these services. Because at the end of the day, water is a human right, and also, it's a human right. The basic water needs are a human right in the concept of UN Charter. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. I have also from the audience questions. This is for all of you. How can small island developing states, SIDS, make the most of the opening of the blue economy with the latest update to the United Nations Convention of Law of the Seas? And who's the best place to prevent over exploitation of the oceans? We start with Ms. Sultanate.
Sorry. Yeah. So I would say that I mean, if you're looking at it at the each country would have to ensure that they have their CRZ regulations in place, and ensure that this is implemented. And if that is something which is happening, then it would uh, it's like, so if each one is doing their own bit, or each country is doing their own bit, then it will ensure that you're not encroaching into into the other countries waters and territories. I mean, these are things that we need to look at. But again, I would say that when we are looking at, say, the like say, to give you an example, like, when we were looking at when the CRZ uh, law had to be implemented. So say it's the coastal regulation zone. It allows where the constructions can come up on the landward side, and it also regulates, say, how much you can get into when you're looking at, say, fishing into the into the seaward side. So so I would say that is something that is important, which needs to be, that regulation has to be, has to be in place for all the countries, because that's important, is what I feel. If I have understood the question correctly, I mean,
Yes,
I'm not sure.
Yes, you did, but I mean, in the light of, I mean, you mentioned the fishery dynamics, okay, and we know that the climate change will change this fisheries dynamics. So, in your opinion, there be like should there be a global reevaluation of fishing quotas and agreements? I mean, how can we maintain the equitable distribution while maintaining while taking into consideration these impacts on the fish stocks in different areas? Do we need to reevaluate the agreements and the equitable distribution?
I haven't studied much about these international agreements, but one of the things, like, I mean, if I'm looking at it, say, based on my interaction with the fishing community in the coastal areas, so say there are these local bans where you can't go fishing into the sea, and that's during the spawning time, so that you're allowing, for spawning. So but what happens is that sometimes it's like, say, so one state is not going into, but the neighboring state is coming and fishing into their waters. And so there are these kinds of clashes that is coming up, when we are looking at it in the context of fishing. And this is something that we would have to look at it in a way, that in I mean, when I'm saying that, if we are looking at it, like, so they have their own knowledge system as to when you should be going fishing, when you shouldn't be going fishing. And these are some of the things that we need to take into account, even, and look at it in the context of policy as well, so that you regulate the fishing accordingly. And if it is, say, one state is not going fishing at that time, then even the other state should not be going fishing at the same time, or you should prevent them from coming and fishing into their water, because they are trying to safeguard the fish catch, so that there is so they would have the fish for the future when they go fishing over there.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Richard, do you have any comments on this point? I mean, on the small island developing states and their opportunities in the blue economy.
Yeah, in the light of the law of the sea, the Convention of the Law of the Sea, I think there are specific areas that have been demarcated under that agreement. So you have the territorial waters, which are about 12 nautical miles from the country. And then I think there are several demarcations until you have the exclusive economic zone, which is about 200 nautical miles. And of course, the countries themselves are supposed to be exploiting resources from these particular zonations. But in most cases, you have international vessels from other countries that violating these agreements, and they are coming, for example, into and within the territories of exclusive economic zones and even territorial waters. Yeah? Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
We can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
I think,
Yeah.
Okay, now his
Muhammad,
screen had frozen. Yeah.
Okay, I'm very sorry. That was from my internet connection. I thought it's from Professor Richard. Very sorry for that. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying that we have international vessels that are violating these agreements, and they are entering into exclusive economic zones and territorial waters of these small island developing nations. They should be able to exploit that. Now, we have, I don't know, the last week I was shown a system, a global tracking system for marine vessels that are fishing, and they are supposed to be reporting. They have transponders that they are supposed to be reporting where they are to see whether there is violation of this. So if these systems could be improved, then it could ensure that the small island developing states are able to exploit their resources within their territories, and maybe that would enhance the gains from their blue economy. I think that's what I could say on this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Professor Radwan, now in the same context, actually, okay, it's not about only the fisheries and the blue zone, but it's also about the transboundary water agreements. Okay, now we have like increasing in fresh water from like melting glaciers in areas, and also other areas face like the shortage in rainfalls or water scarcity. So how do you think these differences, these like emerging and vast differences, will shape geopolitical relations and re-evaluating the international water agreements or the binary even water agreement between neighbors, between regional countries in the coming future?
That's a good question. I think in the world we have more than 260 plus aquifer or catchment basins that are shared between different neighboring countries. Luckily, most of these shared are between countries who have cooperative effort, and they have a common authority that, for example, or initiative that can manage this shared water system. The problem that this should have been studied in a win-win situation. Yani, transboundary water can be shared, although you have the shared water principles of the upstream sovereignty, no harm rule, and the previous historical use, they can be used as guidelines. But unfortunately, there is no strict international convention on shared water resources related to shared water resources, either surface or groundwater, because we have many also of groundwater aquifers that are shared. This the best way to deal with that on a case by case by establishing a common authority with different stakeholders and with under UN or some sort of international guidance, so that they can help them in developing these shared aquifer and enhance the quality and the sustainability of water resources for all riparian and sharing countries.
Can you please enlighten us more, like from examples from the Middle East, like from Jordan, Israel, and Palestinian
Yes, we
territories,
have.
also Ethiopia, Egypt, Sudan?
Yes, Professor Malowa, I was the director of the Friend Nile Basin during my service in UNESCO, and I worked with Professor Matowa in University of Nairobi. I think he is a retired professor now. That was about 20 years ago. So in that concept, we have developed the Nile Basin Initiative and the Friend Nile Basin Initiative developed and under the World Bank and different donors community. They put a lot of money to develop integrated system related to water use, energy development, irrigation, environment, and all the countries benefit from this initiative. And I think it was a success story to some stage. I don't know what is the status now. My experience is about 15 years ago when I was in the board of this initiative. The same thing in Jordan. Now in Jordan, we have the River Jordan, and the River Jordan is shared between Syria, Lebanon, occupied Palestine, Israel, and Jordan. So this is, we have, hydropolitical complexity in this, where we have hostility in some areas. So this is an example of the aquifer or a basin that needs to be really well studied. We have a peace treaty between Jordan and Israel, and it has an amendment on water which address the issue, but it's not sufficient to address all issues. If we go to the, for example, to the Euphrates and Tigris, and it's shared between Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and we can see that there is a lot of effect, for example, in the upstream development, and this is we go back to the Nile Basin. When they have the Ethiopia, they built this big dam that affects the all water system in the Nile Basin. And when the GAP project was developed in Turkey, it affects the flow in the Euphrates and the Tigris River. It affects both Syria and Iraq. So this has to be really done through international cooperation, having in mind that it is a win-win situation, not really one-sided action from upstream country.
This is exactly one of our audience questions. Mr. Ahmed is asking about how can integrated water resource management principles be refined in the context of climate change to ensure like a harmonious balance between socio-economic and environmental needs, not only on the local, but on regional and global scales. Yes. Okay. So, sorry for that. But now, just I want to ask also one question for all our guests. What will be your recommendation? I mean, now we were talking about the water system, then the same question will be reflected on the oceanic health. What will be your recommendation to the negotiator in the COP28 regarding how to deal with all the climate challenge to our water systems? We'll start with Prof. Richard.
Thank you. And that's a very hard question on what we are going
very
to
necessary one, believe me, because actually all your this enlightenment and insightful information will be actually incorporated and included in the T28 final report, which will be handled to the COP28 leadership.
Yes. So the one thing that we need to realize is that climate change is going to impact, will have an impact on the supply risk of water. And this means the hydrological availability, the physical availability of water is going to be impacted by climate change, either through increased temperatures or depressed precipitation. That one we have to embrace and get to know how we are going to deal with that in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation measures would go fast. We've discussed a number of adaptation measures that we could employ and deploy at country level. But also when we are doing these negotiations, I think there has been a discussion on the geopolitics of water, where we've had a Prof mentioned about the Nile, River Nile and River Euphrates and Tigris that are being affected by sort of unilateral decisions of individual countries that want to develop the resources for themselves without taking into consideration the other water users. So, and following the question of one of the participants, how we are going to include in integrated water resource management. It should be the case that all the countries that are involved in a particular resource, especially if it's a transboundary resource, all of them should be involved. We don't want disadvantages, some parts of the world to be disadvantaged because one country is taking advantage of that particular resource because they are the upstream users and they are controlling everything. The other thing is on the vulnerability of the supply of water. With climate change, we expect that largely because of the basins, the water in the basins is not as much as it used to be, then water downstream and the demand to the population, also the demand to the economy with those increasing, then societies are going to be more vulnerable when it comes to the supply of water. And climate change is going to heighten this. So again, similar recommendations would go for what we have recommended on the first one, on the supply risk. Finally, on the utilization of water, the relationship between water, the environment, we have to know how much we are extracting from the environment into the economy, how much is circulating within the economy, and how much is moving from the economy to the environment. I think that balance is very important for us to be able to capture. Now, we have, when we are doing the system of national accounts, when we are calculating our GDP, many countries just calculate the incomes. And they will tell you that the GDP of the country has increased maybe by 6%. They are not taking into consideration the importance of the resources, other resources that are going into this GDP. For example, what is the importance of water in the economic system? So we have systems that have been developed right now. We have physical supply and use tables of water to try and incorporate water as a resource into the system of national accounts, so that these national accounts can incorporate water. When we are calculating GDP, we know that it's GDP that is net of water. We are not misrepresenting facts. So it's important that that happens. A few countries have done that, but in the bigger scale, I think all the countries should move in this direction of making sure that water is incorporated in the system of national accounts. So let me stop there and give a chance to the others. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Radwan.
Thank you. This is a good question too. I think we have to deal with climate change as an existing fact. So we have to support specific and update our studies on the impact of climate change on small and developing countries that are highly affected by this climate change without contributing to the emissions. So I would recommend that an international fund should be provided, which is almost there, to help these developing countries to cope with the climate change and to do the climate change resilience in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Also, for on the national level, integration between the different sources, environmental, energy, food, water, all these aspects has to be developed in an integrated manner on the national level. On the international level, formation of a joint committee, especially for riparian countries that are sharing one basin, should be formed, and climate change should be an issue among the major priority areas that has to be addressed in water sharing, because if you consider historical data and water sharing, this can be misleading because sometimes the flow and the discharge of these basins has been reduced significantly over the years. So I think part sharing, you have to also to involve all people and to consider the social equity in the consideration of planning of future projects that may affect the sustainability of the water system and environmental services in any basin or in any area. These are mainly the keywords that I think about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sultanate.
Yeah, so one of the other points that I would like to add is, I mean, the issue of sea level rise, and especially in the context of coastal communities. So because of it, say the land will get salinized, the farmlands. So these are things that we need to also factor in, because so these are some of the impacts that will happen. And how, I mean, for them, so that's one thing. Another thing is that, in terms of when we're looking at the monitoring of oceanic health parameters. So that again, I think is something that needs to be, very strongly promoted, so that, we are able to build this connect between, I mean, the community and the environment, and they can then determine the actions that have to be taken. It's like something that's coming in from themselves, that, okay, the salinity levels are increasing, this is going to impact fish catch for us. So measures need to be taken. So these kinds of things also have to happen, and for that we need to, look at monitoring systems where the community is also involved in it. And I would say that, this is something that we should also be focusing on.
Many thanks indeed, Ms. Sultanate. Actually, you answered my even coming question about your recommendation about the climate change impacts on the oceanic health. Okay, and this the same recommendation we need from Professor Richard and Professor Radwan for the COP28. This time regarding the steps that we must do, okay, to mitigate or to adapt with the climate change consequences on the oceanic health. Professor Richard.
Well, the impact of climate change on oceanic health is more long term. It could be in form of acidification, where you have carbonic acid, or it could be also in terms of melting of snow, and you have increased water levels. And both of these can only be addressed through mitigation efforts, because largely they are a factor of increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Both of them, I don't see any adaptation measure that would cure that immediately. I think this is purely an issue of mitigation efforts that countries have to take consciously, individually and also globally. I think we have to be very conscious on the commitments that we've given in the NDCs. Countries need to make sure that they fulfill the commitments that they've given to the NDCs, and also in the discussions of the net zero emissions by 2050. Maybe there are going to be new commitments. So in my thinking, oceanic health perhaps is a more long-term measure, not short-term. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Radwan.
I think oceanic health should be addressed in an international concept, because, as mentioned, it might affect the quality of water in the ocean as well as the water level. And you think about these small islands that are directly affected by sea level rise or deterioration in quality, acidity of the ocean water. This has to be addressed on a global and international level, and they should set guidelines and mitigation plan to affect that in a very short term as well as long term plans. There should be a achievable plan that can be address these two issues of seawater rise and salinity or the acidity of this ocean water, because it directly affects the ecosystem in the ocean itself.
Thank you so much. And I have a question for you, Professor Radwan, from one of our audience, Ms. Lima. She asked on the context of sustainable drought management, how should policymakers prioritize between agriculture demand, human consumption, and ecological needs?
This is a very good question. Most of people think that ecosystem service consumes water. I think although they consume some water, they generate water. So this is very important fact that we have to raise. So we have to consider the ecosystem service allocation, or what you call environmental demand, in our planning for the water balance and water budgeting. If you come to the prioritizing this issue, we will put human on the top of the agenda. We will put agriculture and food production in the second, and ecosystems, environmental demand on the third stage. But we have to maintain the level of sharing of water to the system, so the system can be resilient. It can go back. You don't cut the portion or the demand or the share of the demand to a level that the system is irreversible. So we have to consider this in our planning, in our water resources planning and management. Also, we have to consider alternatives. Always there is plan B for any option and plan or project that we are considering. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, Professor Richard, I have a question for you. Regarding you mentioned in your introduction about the impacts of the climate change on this water cycle, or shifting in the patterns will also affect in somehow the energy, like renewable energy sector. Can you elaborate more about that, please?
Well, there are two ways that this is going to happen. Of course, we say that there's going to be increased temperatures, and then there's going to be depressed precipitation. And when it comes to matters of renewable energy, especially when you're talking about hydro energy, you are getting a lot of hydro energy from water resources, especially in the rivers. The moment you have the basins being impacted by climate change, then that means that you're going to have lesser flow of water to drive the turbines. Sometimes if it dries up, then there's going to be problematic. So you have lower reduction of the energy that is gotten from hydro energy. And that would mean that the supply to the rest of the economy is compromised. And we've seen this, for example, in my country here, where we depend largely on hydro energy. When there is drought, for instance, you have a decline in the dam levels. And these dams are the ones that are driving the turbines, which are producing hydroelectricity. And then you have now to supplement this energy with thermal energy, which is has a negative impact on climate change. So on that front, then increased temperatures and depressed precipitation are going to impact how hydro energy is going to be produced.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Ms. Alternate, regarding the coastal communities, do you think that this is also another question from the audience? Do you think that opening the blue economy will ensure enhancing a lifestyle for them, or that will be on their expenses?
I think it would be in the manner
the real
which
life.
It is it's like, in the manner which we go about with it. It's the process that is important. So, I mean, if we have a consultative process where we have the key stakeholders part of the whole process in determining, the pathway that they want to take, where there is a cost benefit analysis that has been made, and they move forward. So if these things are taken into account, then I would say, then it would be we would be on the right path, which would be beneficial for them, because their voice is heard, they are in it. Otherwise, if it's like, say, the central government is determining what should be done, and and then it's going about, so, then it becomes a problem, where their voice is not taken into account. So even in terms of like, so if a project is planned, then their traditional access gets impacted. Say if there is a project which is coming along the coast, and the traditional access of the fishing community is impacted. So there have been a lot of these kinds of issues, where there are conflicts between, and it's also giving a voice to the vulnerable community or to the marginalized section, so that their voice is heard, their opinion is heard, their concerns are heard, and then the policy is or the plan is determined taking that into account.
Thank you so much. Um, uh, I would like to thank all of you actually for all these in-depth insights. Uh, I mean, I prepared like few questions before the webinar, but with all this information and your insightful discussion, many questions raised. Okay, so thank you so much, because I learned. I mean, personally, I learned a lot from all of you. So thank you, Professor Richard. Thank you, Professor Radwan, and thank you, Ms. Sultanate. And we hope to host you in another occasion, maybe during COP. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.